I had flown this route dozens of times. San Francisco to New York. Red-eye flight. I was settling into my first-class seat, 7A, when I heard the commotion 3 rows back. I don't care what your little paper says. I'm sitting here and I'm not moving. The flight attendant, a patient woman named Sarah according to her name tag, was trying to reason with a blonde woman who had planted herself in seat 10A. The woman's actual boarding pass clearly showed 10E, a middle seat in the back of the economy section. Ma'am, I understand, but this passenger paid for this seat. You'll need to move to your assigned seat so we can complete boarding. The blonde woman crossed her arms. She was probably in her mid-40s, wearing a velour tracksuit that had seen better days and enough jewelry to set off the metal detector twice. Her face had that particular expression I'd come to recognize over the years. The one that said the rules were for other people. I have a medical condition. I need the extra legroom. This is discrimination. Sarah maintained her professional composure. If you have a medical condition that requires accommodating seating, we'd be happy to help, but you would need to have arranged that when you booked your ticket. Right now, I need you to move to your assigned seat. Before we get too deep into this story, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World for more epic tales of entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this one ends. The woman's voice rose loud enough that the entire cabin could hear. I am not moving. I got here first. Possession is 9/10 of the law. If this person wanted this seat, they should have boarded earlier. I watched with mild interest as the actual ticket holder approached, a young man who looked like he might be military based on his haircut and bearing. He seemed embarrassed by the situation. It's okay, he said quietly. I can just take another seat. See? The blonde woman smiled triumphantly. Problem solved. But Sarah shook her head. I'm afraid that's not how it works, sir. Ma'am, this is your final warning. Move to your assigned seat or you'll need to deplane. The woman's face turned red. Fine. Get your manager. I want to speak to whoever is in charge of this flight. I am the senior flight attendant on this aircraft. Sarah's voice remained calm but firm. And I'm telling you that you need to move now. We're delaying departure for everyone. I glanced at my watch. A Patek Philippe my father had given me when I made partner at my law firm. We were supposed to have pushed back 5 minutes ago. I had a morning meeting with a client who was not going to be happy if I was late. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my assistant, then sat back to watch. The woman stood up slowly, making a grand show of gathering her oversized purse and shopping bags. This is outrageous. I'm going to report this airline. Do you know who I am? Sarah's expression didn't change. No ma'am, I don't. I'm Karen Westbrook. My husband is very important. He knows the CEO of this airline personally. I bit back a smile. In my 15 years of practicing corporate law, including 5 years representing airlines in various disputes, I'd heard variations of this threat countless times. It never worked the way people thought it would. The young military guy finally got settled in his proper seat. Karen made her way down the aisle, huffing loud enough for everyone to hear her displeasure. She stopped at 10E, stared at the middle seat with obvious disgust, and then kept walking. She walked all the way to first class and stopped at my row. Excuse me. She looked at me expectantly. I need to sit here. I looked up from my phone. I'm sorry? I said I need to sit here. I have a medical condition and I can't sit in those cramped economy seats. This is seat 7A. My seat. Perhaps you should speak with the flight attendant about upgrading your ticket? Her eyes narrowed. Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but I need this seat. You look young and healthy. You can sit anywhere. Sarah reappeared, having followed Karen up the aisle. Ma'am, we've been through this. You need to go to your assigned seat right now. This is medical discrimination. I'm going to sue this airline. I'm going to sue her. Karen pointed at me dramatically. She's refusing to accommodate my disability. I set my phone down and gave Karen my full attention. I'm an attorney specializing in aviation law. What you're doing right now is called disrupting a flight crew, which is a federal offense under Title 49 of the U.S. Code. I'd strongly suggest you take your assigned seat. Karen's mouth opened and closed. For a moment, I thought she might actually comply. Then her face contorted into something ugly. Oh, you're a lawyer. How convenient. You probably planned this whole thing. You're probably working with the airline to harass innocent passengers. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Flight attendants, please prepare for departure. Sarah's expression hardened. Ma'am, last chance. Sit down in your assigned seat or leave the aircraft. Fine. Karen screamed. But you haven't heard the last of this. She stormed back to economy, and I heard her slam herself into what I assumed was her middle seat. The people around her had my sympathy. It was a 6-hour flight. We pushed back 10 minutes late. I tried to focus on the brief I needed to review, but Karen's voice kept carrying from the back of the plane. She was loudly complaining to anyone who would listen about the injustice she'd suffered. About how she was being discriminated against. About how she was going to own this airline when she was done suing them. About an hour into the flight, I got up to use the lavatory. As I walked past Karen's row, she was in the middle of a heated argument with her seatmate about the armrest. The poor man looked exhausted. When I returned to my seat, Sarah stopped by with a drink refill. She leaned down and spoke quietly. I apologize for the disruption earlier. That passenger has been difficult throughout the flight. No apology necessary. I've seen worse. And I had. Much worse. She keeps insisting she's going to sue. Keeps asking for the names of everyone working this flight. Sarah sighed. Some flights are just like this. I handed her my business card. If she actually follows through, have your legal department give me a call. I'd be happy to provide a witness statement. Sarah glanced at the card and her eyebrows rose slightly. My firm was one of the most prominent aviation law practices in the country. Thank you. I'll pass this along. The rest of the flight was relatively quiet, though I could still hear Karen's voice periodically rising above the ambient noise. She was complaining about the food. About the temperature. About the person in front of her reclining their seat. As we began our descent into New York, the captain came on with an announcement. Folks, we're going to be met at the gate by airport security. Please remain seated until they've cleared the situation. I saw several passengers looking around nervously. Karen's voice rang out. It's about time. I hope they're here to arrest that so-called flight attendant for discrimination. But when we pulled up to the gate, I could see through my window that there were indeed security officers waiting. Along with what looked like an airport police officer. The captain's voice came back on. Ladies and gentlemen, again, please remain in your seats. We have one passenger who will be deplaning first. Sarah walked down the aisle toward economy. The plane was silent except for the ambient noise of the engines winding down. Then Karen's voice, confused. Why are you looking at me? I'm the victim here. Ma'am, you need to come with us. I'm not going anywhere. These people need to apologize to me. The security officer's voice was calm but firm. Ma'am, you've been reported for multiple violations of federal aviation regulations. You need to deplane immediately and come with us. This is insane. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling the news. Everyone on this plane is a witness to this harassment. I watched as they escorted her past my row. She was still protesting loudly, her voice echoing through the cabin. As she passed, she locked eyes with me. This is your fault. You started this. I know people. Important people. You're going to regret this. I said nothing. Just watched as they led her off the plane. The gate agent's voice came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. You're now free to deplane. Again, we apologize for the delay and disruption. As I gathered my things, Sarah approached me one more time. Thank you for your patience. And for the card. I have a feeling we might actually need it. Feel free to call anytime, I said. Then, on impulse, I added, out of curiosity, did she give you a hard time during boarding too? Sarah's smile was tight. She tried to board in the priority lane without status. When we asked her to wait, she claimed she had a disability that prevented her from standing. But she had no documentation and seemed perfectly capable of standing while she yelled at us. I nodded. Some people were just like that. Always looking for an angle. Always convinced the rules didn't apply to them. I forgot about Karen Westbrook almost immediately after leaving the airport. I had actual work to do. A major airline was being sued over a crash, and I was second chair on the defense team. That was real. Important. Karen was just another unpleasant person on a plane. Then, 2 weeks later, my assistant buzzed my office. There's someone on line 2 demanding to speak with you. She won't give her name but says it's about a flight incident. Should I tell her you're busy? I almost said yes. Then curiosity got the better of me. Put her through. The voice that came through my phone was unmistakable. Finally. Do you know how hard it was to track you down? Your firm's website doesn't even list junior associates. I'm a senior partner, actually. And you are? You know exactly who I am. We met on that flight where your friend the flight attendant discriminated against me. Ms. Westbrook. What can I do for you? What you can do is talk some sense into your airline friends. They banned me. Banned me. For life. Do you know what that means? I can't fly with them anymore. I have family in California. I have to fly. There are other airlines, Ms. Westbrook. That's not the point. Her voice was rising. The point is they can't do this to me. I have rights. I was the victim and now they're punishing me. Ms. Westbrook, I was on that flight. I witnessed what happened. You refused multiple direct orders from the flight crew, you attempted to take another passenger's seat, and you disrupted the flight. The airline had every right to ban you. So you're admitting you're working with them. I knew it. This whole thing was a setup. Well, I'm suing all of you. You, the airline, that flight attendant, everyone. I rubbed my temple. This conversation was giving me a headache. Ma'am, I'd strongly advise you not to do that. You won't win. Oh really? Well, I already have a lawyer and he says I have an excellent case. Medical discrimination. Emotional distress. Conspiracy. We're going to take you all for everything you're worth. Who's your attorney? She gave me a name I didn't recognize. Probably some personal injury lawyer who took her case on contingency and was going to regret it. Good luck with that, I said, and ended the call. 3 months later, my firm received notice that we were being sued. Karen Westbrook had made good on her threat. She was suing the airline, the flight crew, and me personally for $15 million. The complaint was ambitious. It alleged discrimination based on a disability she couldn't actually name. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. False imprisonment. Conspiracy to deprive her of her civil rights. And, bizarrely, defamation, though I couldn't figure out how that was supposed to apply. Her lawyer clearly didn't specialize in aviation law. Half the claims were nonsense and the rest were time-barred or preempted by federal law. I called the airline's general counsel, whom I'd worked with on several cases. I saw the complaint, he said. It's garbage. We'll move to dismiss within 30 days. Put me on the brief, I said. She named me personally. I want this shut down hard. We filed our motion to dismiss with prejudice. The brief was 40 pages of case law explaining in excruciating detail why every single one of Karen's claims failed as a matter of law. We attached the security footage from the airport. The audio recordings from the flight. Witness statements from Sarah and 5 other passengers. The evidence was damning. It showed exactly what I'd witnessed: Karen repeatedly refusing lawful orders, attempting to steal someone else's seat, and disrupting the flight. There was no discrimination. No conspiracy. Just a woman who thought rules didn't apply to her and found out otherwise. Karen's lawyer filed an opposition that was somehow worse than the original complaint. He cited cases from the wrong jurisdiction. Made arguments that had been explicitly rejected by the Supreme Court. And claimed that video evidence was somehow inadmissible because, well, he never quite explained why. The hearing was almost anticlimactic. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, had clearly read the briefs. She let Karen's lawyer argue for about 5 minutes before cutting him off. "Counsel, I've read your brief. You haven't cited a single case that supports any of Ms. Westbrook's claims. The video evidence alone is fatal to your case. Motion granted with prejudice. Ms. Westbrook, you are not to file any more lawsuits based on this incident. If you do, I will consider sanctions." Karen, who had been sitting in the gallery, stood up. "But Your Honor, you didn't even hear my side of the story." "Sit down, Ms. Westbrook. This matter is closed. This is corruption. You're all in on it together. I'm going to report you to someone." The judge's expression darkened. "Ms. Westbrook, if you don't sit down and be quiet, I will hold you in contempt." Security escorted her from the courtroom, still yelling about injustice and conspiracy. I should have felt satisfied. We'd won. Completely and decisively. But something bothered me. Karen's absolute conviction that she was the victim. Her complete inability to see that she'd brought all of this on herself. And then I got curious. In law, we have access to databases that track litigation. PACER for federal cases. State court systems for local matters. I ran Karen Westbrook's name through them. The results were staggering. She'd filed 37 lawsuits in the past 8 years. Against neighbors. Against stores. Against restaurants. Against her former employer. Against her apartment building. Against her doctor. Against other airlines. Every single one had been dismissed or lost. But that hadn't stopped her from filing more. I started reading through some of the complaints. They followed a pattern. Karen would get into a dispute with someone. She'd escalate it through increasingly hostile behavior. When they pushed back or enforced their rules, she'd sue claiming discrimination or harassment. One case involved a restaurant that refused to seat her because she'd shown up 45 minutes after her reservation time without calling. She sued for discrimination against people with time blindness. The case was dismissed. Another involved a gym that terminated her membership after she got into physical altercations with 3 different members over equipment. She claimed they were discriminating against her because of an unspecified disability. Dismissed. There was even a case against a grocery store that banned her for screaming at a teenage cashier who wouldn't accept her clearly expired coupon. She claimed age discrimination, even though she was younger than the store manager who made the decision. Dismissed. Karen Westbrook was what we in the legal profession call a vexatious litigant. Someone who abuses the court system to harass people they don't like. I did some more digging. Public records. Social media. I found her Facebook page, which was public. It was full of rants about various businesses and people who had wronged her. Photos of managers she wanted to expose. Screenshots of 1-star reviews she'd left. And then I found something interesting. Karen had a blog. "Fighting Back Against Discrimination Everywhere" was the title. In it, she documented every fight she'd had, every lawsuit she'd filed. She actually seemed proud of it. But buried in one of her posts was a detail that caught my attention. She lived in my city. Not just my city, but my neighborhood. She lived 3 blocks from my apartment building. And according to her most recent post, she was planning to sue her building's HOA, something about them denying her request to install a satellite dish on the roof of their brownstone. I sat back in my chair and thought about what to do with this information. On one hand, it wasn't really my problem. Karen's lawsuit against me had been dismissed. I could just move on with my life. On the other hand, Karen had cost me time, stress, and legal fees. She'd sued me personally, which meant it had gone on my malpractice insurance record even though we'd won. And she was clearly never going to stop this pattern of behavior unless someone made her. I made a decision that probably wasn't entirely professional but felt absolutely right. I called a friend who worked in property management. Rachel, hypothetically speaking, if someone in your building was a serial litigant who sued every business they interacted with, would the building want to know? God, yes. People like that are a nightmare for HOAs. They tie you up in bogus lawsuits and run up legal fees. Why? Just curious, I said. Hey, you still know people on the board at that brownstone on Waverly Place? Rachel did. And she was happy to pass along what I'd found. The public record of Karen's litigation history. Her blog where she bragged about her lawsuits. Her recent post about suing the HOA. 2 weeks later, Karen's blog had a new post. A furious rant about how the HOA had denied her satellite dish request and was now trying to evict her for bogus lease violations. I didn't follow it too closely. I had real work to do. But every so often, I'd check her blog just to see what she was up to. Apparently, the HOA had found that Karen was violating several terms of her lease. She'd been subletting her apartment on Airbnb without permission. She'd modified her unit without approval, removing a wall that turned out to be load-bearing. And she'd been harassing other residents to the point where 3 families had complained. Any one of those violations would have been enough for eviction. All 3 together made it a slam dunk. Karen, predictably, sued. She claimed the HOA was retaliating against her for her satellite dish request. The case was dismissed within a month. The judge's order noted that Karen had a documented history of filing frivolous lawsuits and that her claims were entirely without merit. She was evicted 60 days later. Her blog went dark after that. I assumed she'd moved out of the neighborhood. Out of my life. Problem solved. Then, 6 months later, I got a call from Sarah, the flight attendant from that original incident. I hope you remember me, she said. You gave me your card and said to call if I needed anything. Of course. What's going on? That woman. Karen Westbrook. She's back. Apparently, Karen had tried to fly again, this time on a different airline. She'd pulled the same stunt, trying to take a first-class seat she hadn't paid for. When the crew confronted her, she'd claimed she was being targeted because of her previous lawsuit. The airline had records of the ban from the first carrier. They'd refused to let her board and had her escorted from the airport. Karen, true to form, was now suing this airline too. She's claiming it's blacklisting, Sarah explained. That all the airlines are conspiring against her. And she's trying to subpoena records from my airline to prove it. That's not going to work, I said. Airlines share information about disruptive passengers. It's not a conspiracy, it's safety. I know that. You know that. But she's making our lives miserable. She's filed complaints with the DOT. She's posting about my airline on social media. She's trying to start some kind of viral campaign about passenger rights. I pulled up Karen's blog, which had apparently come back to life. Sure enough, she was positioning herself as some kind of activist for airline discrimination victims. She had maybe 50 followers, most of whom seemed to be bots. But she was persistent. What do you need from me? I asked Sarah. The legal team wants to know if you'd be willing to serve as an expert witness. To testify about her pattern of behavior and abuse of the legal system. I smiled. I'd be delighted. The case never went to trial. Karen's lawyer withdrew after the airline filed a motion to declare her a vexatious litigant. The motion included declarations from me and 4 other attorneys she'd sued over the years. It documented her 37 previous lawsuits, all unsuccessful. Her blog posts bragging about filing suit. Her complete inability to accept responsibility for her own behavior. The judge granted the motion. From now on, Karen couldn't file any lawsuit without first getting permission from the court. She'd have to show that her claim had merit and wasn't just another harassment campaign. For most people, that would be the end of the story. But Karen wasn't most people. She tried to appeal the vexatious litigant order. The appeal was denied. She tried to file complaints against me with the state bar. They were dismissed as frivolous. She tried to sue the judge who'd sanctioned her. That case lasted exactly 1 hearing before being thrown out. And through it all, she kept blogging. Kept posting on social media. Kept insisting that she was the victim of a massive conspiracy. I stopped paying attention to her after a while. I had a life to live and a career to maintain. Karen Westbrook was just another unpleasant memory. Until last month. I was at a charity gala for a legal aid organization. Fancy dinner, silent auction, the usual networking event. I was talking with a federal judge I'd argued before a few times when someone tapped my shoulder. "Excuse me, are you the attorney who represented the airline in Westbrook v. Transglobal?" I turned to find a woman in her 30s, professionally dressed, holding a glass of wine. "I am." "Why?" "My name is Jennifer Harris. I'm an assistant U.S. attorney. I've been building a case against Karen Westbrook for fraud and wire fraud. I'd like to talk to you about it." We found a quiet corner. Jennifer explained that Karen's litigation wasn't just harassment. It was a business model. She'd file bogus lawsuits, then offer to settle for small amounts. $5,000. $10,000. Just enough that it was cheaper for the defendant to pay than to fight. Most people paid. "We estimate she's collected over $300,000 over the years," Jennifer said. "That's fraud. And because she used email and interstate wire transfers for some of it, it's federal." "How can I help?" "We need witnesses. People who fought back and can testify about her pattern of behavior. People who can show that she knew her claims were false but filed them anyway." I gave her everything I had. My files from the lawsuit. Declarations from the flight crew. Evidence of her blog and social media posts. Contact information for the other attorneys I knew she'd sued. 3 weeks ago, Karen Westbrook was indicted on 14 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of conspiracy. The indictment alleged she'd been running a lawsuit mill for nearly a decade, targeting people and businesses she knew would be afraid to fight back. Her bail was set at $50,000, which she couldn't post. She's currently in federal detention awaiting trial. This morning, I got a letter. It was from Karen. Handwritten on jail stationery. The letter was 4 pages of rambling accusations. How I'd ruined her life. How I'd conspired with the airlines and the courts and the prosecutors to frame her. How I'd taken away her freedom to speak out against injustice. But the last paragraph was what caught my attention. "When I get out of here, I'm going to sue you for everything. I'm going to take your law license, your career, your reputation. You think you've won? This isn't over. This will never be over." I read the letter twice, then called Jennifer Harris. "She's threatening me," I said. "In writing. From jail." Jennifer sighed. "Add it to the pile." She sent similar letters to 3 of the prosecutors, the judge who set her bail, and at least 6 witnesses. Witness tampering? Already added to the charges. I hung up and sat at my desk for a long moment. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. Something that was petty and vindictive and absolutely not the high road. I framed the letter. It hangs in my office now, right next to my law degree. A reminder that some people never learn. That they'll burn their entire life down rather than admit they were wrong. And every time I see it, I smile. Because Karen Westbrook spent her entire adult life trying to make other people pay for her problems. She sued and harassed and bullied anyone who wouldn't give her exactly what she wanted. But in the end, the only person she destroyed was herself. If you enjoyed this epic tale of entitlement and consequences, smash that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World. Because trust me, we've got plenty more stories of people who thought they were above the rules and learned otherwise. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the moment a Karen gets exactly what she deserves.